Us humans, we're a crazy group of creatures, aren't we? We've all got our different beliefs and traditions, like our own versions of the world, our own unique realities, yet we live right next to each other. It's sort of strange, isn't it? And the thing is, someone has to be right. Sometimes it's just impossible to know who, until it's too late. About 13 years ago, a young couple, the Knights, moved in next door to me bringing their own beliefs, or lack thereof. You know, the funny thing about beliefs is that you forget you have them until somebody brings them up. You forget someone you just met might have a totally different outlook on the world, especially if everyone you know thinks the same way you do. You don't realize what you might be missing about the world, good or bad. I was reminded of this complicated truth the first time I spoke with my new neighbors, the Knights. They asked about the paper birch tree on the other side of their back fence, the one with the burls that look like eyes staring out from every branch, and the seed pods filled with little teeth hanging from tiny threads. I told them not to worry, that those teeth would be gone by the next morning. The Knights gave me my first opportunity to explain our small town tradition. Maybe I didn't do a proper job, or things might have turned out differently. Hopefully I can do better this time. Going back as far as my oldest relatives can remember, folks around here have saved each and every one of their children's baby teeth until the last one falls out. They take those teeth, all 20, stick them into seed pods and hang them from that old birch tree. It's on public land that's part of a park behind our houses, and it's been dead for decades. It stands there, naked and white, staring in all directions, full of empty pods that once held the teeth of every child raised here. If you've never seen one, the seed pod of a birch tree isn't unlike a pine cone. It's just a little thinner and longer. It opens up like a pine cone and has dozens of little pockets that seeds come out of. Those pockets are just the right size to contain children's teeth. You're probably thinking this sounds strange, and you're right. You might think I should have started with why people around here carry on this tradition, this ritual. And I might agree if the reason for it wasn't the only thing harder to grasp than the tradition itself. See, around here in this little town so far from everywhere, with wide plains to the south and thick forest to the north, we all share one belief. We believe in something called the tull. That's a phonetic spelling, not the original. Early writings from our founders describe the tull as a force. The old-timers talk about it like a spirit. I've seen it manifest as an actual being. It is all of these things, and no matter what you believe, I suggest you take it very seriously. We leave the teeth of our young hanging from that tree for their own protection. If by the day after their last tooth falls out, their teeth are not hanging from that paper birch, the tull will kidnap them. No one knows where they go, only that they vanish for good. Don't believe me? Why would you? You have your beliefs, your worldview, and I'm sure it doesn't include things like the tull. Why would it? Well, look up how many children from here have gone missing throughout the decades, and you'll see that not one of them has been found. Ever. Without exception. We've reached out to priests and exorcists, spiritualists and demonologists. No one can help us. We just keep hanging our children's teeth from that tree, and as long as we do, they stay safe. Some folks leave when they become pregnant or as soon as their child is born. Others don't have the means to flee. In this town, we support each other, though. We keep each other safe. That's why I tried so hard to convince the Knights to keep their baby's teeth. I had 6 years to do it, but it wasn't enough. Jamar and Madison Knight moved in next door when Madison was already 3 weeks pregnant. They didn't know it at the time, but within a month they took a trip to the nearest hospital and came back with the first pictures of their baby boy, Troy, just a little peanut in his mother's womb. Knowing I had years to wait, I held off on explaining to them the full truth behind why people hang teeth-filled seed pods from the birch tree. I let them enjoy the magic of watching an infant grow into a child. The first smile, the first word, the first step, the first tooth. The Knights frequently complained about the paper birch, and I'm told they once reported it to the county sheriff, trying to get it taken down as a health risk and a danger to the people who visited the park after a fresh set of teeth showed up there. Not many people visited that park, though. It butts up against the North Woods, and folks around here steer clear of those woods. The Knights got the cold shoulder from the sheriff. They put up a hedgerow along their back fence to block their view of the tree and let it be. I can't blame them. While I have a somewhat occluded view of the tree from my own house, it doesn't dominate the picture in my window the same way, and I've trained myself to ignore it. Plus, my kids all grew up and moved away years ago. The tull doesn't pose any threat to me anymore. I've already done my part to placate it. I have become like an old watchdog, which is why I made it my duty to slowly convince the Knights to take the old legend seriously. Unfortunately, a tragic event gave me an opportunity to prove to them just how serious they should take it. Howard and Thelma Dawson were friends of mine in grade school. Their daughter Gemma's teeth once hung from the paper birch. Gemma tried going off to college, but when she got pregnant, she hurried up and married the father, a young man named Tyler, and moved back here. Nobody mentioned the tull to Tyler, who brought home the family name Brinks, until after their daughter Zoe began showing teeth. By the time Troy Knight turned 4, Zoe Brinks was about 11, and she had only one tooth left to lose. One night, the Knights and I awoke to wailing cries coming from out back. I went out to my back fence and found Gemma and Tyler kneeling in front of the paper birch. All those burl eyes looked down on them with ambivalent disdain. Jamar Knight came out to investigate too. I begged him to be sensitive. Tyler noticed us and left his crying wife's side to explain that Zoe's last tooth fell out while she was at school and went down a drain. He and Gemma had faithfully saved every other tooth, but without the last one, it was all for naught. Gemma cried and begged for the tull to accept one of her own teeth in place of Zoe's to complete the set. She begged for her daughter to be spared. Tyler requested privacy, and I obliged after telling him to knock on my door if I could do anything for them. He seemed grateful but scared. Madison Knight came outside too. I ushered her and Jamar away from the grieving parents. I could tell they did not grasp why losing Zoe's last tooth upset her parents so much, despite all of my warnings over the years. But it was neither the time nor place to argue with them over beliefs. And I must admit, I prayed the Knights were correct. It had been a long time since a child disappeared at the hands of the tull. I prayed that the curse might have somehow ended while we all obliviously carried on the tradition. I prayed the tull had moved on. The following morning, a new pod hung from a branch on the paper birch. It held 19 small teeth, and one larger one. Blood painted the whole thing. But Gemma's sacrifice was not enough. Sirens soon filled our quiet air. Deputies taped off the Brinks' home, and the coroner wheeled out 3 covered stretchers. Gemma must have realized the ritual could not be amended, regardless of how innocent Zoe's mistake had been. Regardless of how hard they had tried to comply. She smothered her daughter in her sleep before the tull could take her. Then, wrapped with guilt and sorrow, she and Tyler drank bleach and lay down beside Zoe's cold corpse. Gemma's parents, Howard and Thelma, insist to this day their daughter would not have taken such drastic action without absolute certainty the ritual failed. They believe, as do I, she must have seen the tull coming for Zoe and taken her away before it could. Better to send her to heaven than allow her be taken wherever the tull dwells. The tull is not from our world, as you may have gathered. It's not even from this universe. The tull came from whatever our universe is ever expanding into. How or why it came here is an eternal mystery. It has these envoys, its children we call them, that it sends into the world to carry out its will. They're said to mimic humans somewhat poorly, but they've learned if they replace their teeth with real human teeth, particularly those of children, they can pass well enough to trick particularly compassionate or gullible people. Our tradition is something adapted from the native tribe who, ironically, tried to warn our ancestors about the tull as our ancestors ran them off this land. And no, the tull is nothing from their ancient religion. They just happened to be here when it came. They were forced to cope with it the same way any Christian, Jew, Muslim, or Hindu has to now. Who knows how many innocent children they lost before they worked out the practice of tooth-giving. Tradition steps outside of the legend when it comes to the birch tree. Somewhere along the line, it got decided that those distinctive eye-shaped burls on the paper birch are the watchful eyes of the tull. If you hang a child's full set of teeth from a branch of the paper birch, the tull sees them and will not pursue the child the night after they lose their last tooth. So why teeth? Now we're back to the legend. As mentioned, the children of the tull find it easier to trick people if they have genuine human teeth in their smiles. They can craft the most innocent smiles with the teeth of children, which is why they yearn for them so dearly. They prize children's teeth so much they are willing to spare the entire family if each child's baby teeth are handed over willingly. If neglected, they will steal the child to make use of what they can out of their mature teeth as punishment to the parents. And there is often more. You might think children could simply be lured into the woods by an inhuman envoy, even one with an inauthentic smile, but children are not nearly as susceptible as adults to false grins. They don't lie to each other as often as adults do, and thus are less accustomed to seeing the grin of a liar. It puts them off. Our children can be taken by force, but are done so rarely and only with direct involvement from the tull. Its children are not strong enough on their own, thankfully, or else my great-great-grandparents' generation would have been the last in our family tree. Over the years, the knights became angrier and angrier with me for bringing up the legend of the tull. They insisted the story was made up to scare children from strangers or something. They told me to leave them alone, to raise Troy as they saw fit. They did not want to end up like that dead family did, Jamar told me one night. I pointed out that the Brinks ended up that way because they did not complete the proper sacrifice, but my words gained me no ground with him. I begged the knights, even if they did not believe, to simply save Troy's baby teeth. I told them they could even give them to me for safekeeping, and that I would deliver them to the tree when the time came. Troy wouldn't even have to know why they were saving them. They could have stuck with the old tooth fairy story, which is an unsettling legend in its own right, and collected his teeth that way. I'm sure Troy must have already heard about the tull anyway. But the knights insisted they would not, in their words, fill their son's head with wild fiction about mythical creatures. I don't think they trusted me, but it went deeper than that. They simply did not believe. What was I to do? My heart broke for the boy every time I saw him wave back at his mother on the way out the door with a new gap in his innocent smile. Over the years, I watched him grow from a little boy into an adolescent. One day, while reading on my rear deck, I noticed him dribbling a basketball and shooting hoops on his back patio. He waved to me, and I waved back. That was all the interaction his parents allowed me to have. He was 11 at the time. I returned my attention to my book, but a few minutes later I heard the backboard rattle and a hollow thud, followed by an oof. Instinctively, I looked toward the sound and saw young Troy pressing a hand against his cheek with his head down as the basketball bounced into the grass. "You all right?" I called to him. His parents were both still at work. "Yeah," he called back to me. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. "You're bleeding," I said. Troy grinned crookedly and held up a tiny white object between his thumb and pointer finger. "It's my last tooth," he proudly told me. More blood burbled out between his lips. "You need help?" I asked. "No," he said, collecting his ball. "My mom will be home soon." I said, "All right, well, you know where to find me." He nodded at me and went inside, taking his tooth with him. A couple of minutes later, he returned to the patio with blood smeared all down his neck. "All right?" I asked. He shook his head. "It won't stop bleeding." I met him at his front door with my personal first aid kit since I wasn't sure what kind of supplies Jamar and Madison kept around the house. I helped him pack his gums to stop the bleeding, and once it seemed under control, I told him, "You should make sure to put that tooth somewhere safe. Do your parents have somewhere special they keep all your baby teeth?" He looked at me like the silly old man I am. "No," he half laughed. "We just throw them out. They're gross." All those years I'd hoped at least one of his parents secretly stashed his lost teeth, hid them away just in case. "Do you give them to your parents to get rid of?" I asked, still holding out hope. "Nope," he said with perfect nonchalance. "They just toss them right in the garbage anyway." "And you've seen them do this?" I asked. Troy grew suspicious and side-eyed me as he replied, Yeah. Why?" My heart broke for the child all over again. In less than 24 hours, I knew he would be gone. Totally unbeknownst to him, his parents had damned him. I'd done all I could. There was nothing left for me to say or do to change his fate, but to try to convince his parents to pack up that very night and leave, never to return. Madison came home and kicked me out with harsh words even after Troy explained I'd helped him stop his bleeding. She followed me outside where I warned her one final time to escape. She laughed at me, cackled right in my face like she'd lost her mind. I think the stress of not knowing whose beliefs would prove true the next day may have hit her in a powerful new way that afternoon. She knew one of us would be vindicated the following morning, and I must say, the consequences of her being wrong far outweighed my own. It would have been so easy for her and Jamar to save those teeth, but they had thrown that opportunity away the very first time they tossed one of Troy's teeth in the garbage. She knocked on my door late that night, long after Jamar came home. I think they got in a fight. Her eyes were stained red with hours' worth of tears. She held a small porcelain dish with a pair of tiny angel wings embossed on the lid out for me to take. I refused to touch it. She lifted the lid to show me 3 tiny teeth. "Can we do anything with these?" she asked. "We saved his first few. I just couldn't bring myself to throw away any piece of my son in those early days. But as he started losing his teeth faster and, he wasn't our little baby anymore, I could see him growing and it felt so stupid and creepy to keep collecting his teeth. Plus, I didn't want to feel like I was giving in to your awful legend. I couldn't imagine myself hanging my little boy's teeth out there in that tree, Years ago, Jamar threw one away without saying anything about it to me, and then it was too late anyway, I thought. Right? Because you need all of them. But is there anything we can do with these?" I told her no, and that my involvement with them needed to end. I didn't want to be seen working against the will of the tull. I had told them everything I could to help them, and they made their choices with the information I provided. They rejected my wisdom when it would have been easy to listen. I would offer no assistance now that, in consequence of their own actions, things were difficult. I'll give the Knights credit where it's due. They did abandon their house late that night. I heard they went and hid in some motel somewhere not too far away, but far enough to keep Troy safe. They survived that night and returned 2 days later. You can imagine my relief watching Troy climb out of the back of their car and bound up to the house with the confidence of a man who's defeated death. He didn't see me watching him through a sheer curtain, but I caught him looking for me with a wry grin wrenching his face. His parents probably told him while they were away about what I claimed would happen to him that night. Morons. How could they not understand they'd survived because of my warning, not in spite of it? The Tull and its envoys are not omnipotent beings like the devil. For whatever reason, they're connected to this place. Only in their false forms can the envoys carry the Tull's power further into the world. The Tull can be outrun if you're willing to abandon your home after you've run afoul of it. You can't just run away for a couple of nights and think you've escaped, or that you've disproven the existence of something you are so ignorant of. I woke that night to the cough of a chainsaw. I knew where to look. Through a window, I saw Jamar Knight standing outside his back fence by the birch tree in the park. He attempted to start his chainsaw again. He wasn't wearing a shirt, only a pair of blue jeans with no belt. I couldn't see from my angle, but I guessed he was barefoot. The man had gone outside and grabbed his chainsaw in a hurry. Wondering what had sparked his action so suddenly that he didn't spare the time to dress, I looked to the woods. To be honest, I expected to see one of its children, not the Tull itself in its rare earthly form. Yet there it stood, its gray mask showing between the trees. Its visage trapped light like the moon. The rest of its form remained invisible, yet that smooth, stony face with sharp pits for eyes and a formless mouth made itself the most prominent point of focus in all the outdoors. Jamar screamed something antagonistic at the visage in the woods. I could not understand him through the glass. The mask protruded slightly further, and the trees beside it creaked forward. Jamar yanked the chainsaw again, and it finally gurgled to life. As he swung it toward the paper birch's trunk, a hyena-esque cackling arose from the woods. I let go of my curtain and let it close, not wanting to witness something I was not supposed to see. I can only imagine the punishment which could follow such an infraction. I heard the chainsaw die a moment later and made assumptions about Jamar's fate. I did not witness what actually happened. However, I can tell you what Jamar reportedly said in the psych ward a week later when he finally began talking again. He said the burls on the birch tree all started blinking out of sync, as if each were controlled by a separate mind. When he reacted, his hands slipped from the chainsaw's safety grip and it shut off. Then the children began to emerge from the trees. He claimed they looked like people with clay skin, and they had no faces, only teeth. The teeth supposedly stuck out of their heads unevenly in the vague shape of a smile. I say we can trust Jamar's description, despite his shattered mind. Though bizarre, one can see it is consistent with the legend's explanation for how the Tull utilizes our children's teeth. And don't forget, Jamar did not believe that legend. I don't think he even knew it well enough to craft a relating visual with his fragile mental capacity. Jamar Knight vanished that night, along with his son. Madison claimed to have had a nightmare about a blurry face in the woods, after which she woke up alone in her bed. She says she knew immediately she had not dreamt the face and understood why she could not find her child. Why had Jamar disappeared, though, she wondered. Then she found the chainsaw behind the back fence. She recalled what Jamar had tried to do. She remembered seeing vague shapes crawling out from the woods, Jamar re-emerged from the woods the following night, still wearing nothing but his blue jeans. I heard Madison's shocked cries and went to my window once more. She ran to the fence and climbed over it around the hedges. Then she ran across the park to where Jamar walked slowly with his hands on the shoulders of something that looked like an 11-year-old boy. It portrayed features not dissimilar to Troy's. Upon seeing his wife, Jamar forced a smile, but even from my window, I could see he was crying. I could already detect the madness behind his eyes. The thing, which he appeared to lead from the woods, but really led him, flashed a smile at Madison too. The smile looked identical to Troy's, right down to each individual tooth, but its dull eyes, misshapen nose, droopy ears, and waxy skin betrayed its true identity as a child of the tull. It beckoned Madison's ear to its lips, maintaining that familiar smile as she stooped, trembling in front of it. Madison says the envoy whispered to her that her son was no longer in this world, that he had gone where everything goes in the end, but offered no further explanation, even as she begged to know more through pouring tears. The envoy, mimicking her son, hugged her, squeezing tightly when she attempted to pull away. Then it gestured for Jamar to go with her and returned to the forest. Only then did I notice a smooth, gray mask watching from deep in the trees, catching the faintest moonlight. When the child vanished into the woods, so did the mask. Troy Knight has never been located, though there have been many alleged sightings over the years. No matter how much time has passed, every account, every blurry photo or CCTV capture shows Troy at the same approximate age as at the time of his disappearance. Jamar, as I've mentioned, fell into a deep psychosis. I've only recently heard that he has recovered, though not quite to the man he used to be. He will likely never be that man again. Madison cares for him while desperately searching for answers about her only child and the place where everything goes in the end. Speaking of endings, that is where this story ends, new neighbor. I just thought you should know what happened to the last family who lived in your new home. I see that baby bump under your sweater. Yes, it is small now, but it will grow, and one day it will have teeth. I beg you to heed this warning I offer you. This is your new beginning. It can be the start of a wonderful new story, or it can end in tragedy. What you believe does not matter nearly as much as what you do, and I beg you, for the sake of your child, to give the tull its due. You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For ad-free episodes and bonus Into the Woods episodes, become a patron with the link in the description. You can also support the show by buying merch. That link is also in the description below. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram at The Warning Woods, and if you feel ready, meet me here next week for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.